I know what happiness is. Boom, 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 boom. Love me tender, love me sweet, never let me go. You make my life complete, and I love you so. Okay, the sirens are out. I can start recording again. Don't worry. Be happy.
I want to know what happiness is. Isn't happiness what we all want? Are you sure? I mean, are you absolutely sure? Do you want to be forever happy? The word happiness has been so overused that I'm not sure we can properly define it. Let's try, shall we? Stop the video and write down your own definition of happiness.
I wanna know what happiness is. Boom, 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 boom.
So, how was it? How much time did it take you to identify what happiness means? I found it challenging, and the biggest realization was that I have no idea. How difficult can it be to determine what makes you happy and then come up with a definition? So I love my cappuccino at my favorite cafe, but is that happiness? Then it lasts only for a while. I sometimes feel engaged in doing something I like very much, and I can even forget about everything, but then is it happiness I'm experiencing or simply a state of flow? If I think about my life in general, up till now, am I happy? Am I satisfied with my life? If the answer is a definite yes, then why strive for more? What a dilemma! I was puzzled by this dilemma long ago. Not that I was concerned with happiness that much in my early 20s, but when I was a student, we had to make the so-called reports. Those were not reports, but I don't know why they were called like this. So, reports in philosophy. I think I was in my second year of study when I had that course, and that course made very little sense to me at the time. Unfortunately, I remember very little. One thing that I distinctly remember is that I had to write a report on happiness. That was quite an endeavor for me. What I could conclude at the time was that philosophers thought that there was no happiness. I have no idea how I arrived at that conclusion, and I don't have the report either anymore. While reading Nettle's book, Happiness, the Science Behind Your Smile, I remembered that conclusion. If I had to write that report now, I think I would understand what the philosophers meant. Nettle, by the way, mentions Immanuel Kant, who said that the concept of happiness is a construct not of reason, but of the imagination. So happiness does exist, at least in our imagination. Just like with everything in this world, the binary bias we seem to be prone to have doesn't help us very much. In our tendency to oversimplify everything, we might totally miss out on life itself. Okay, let's get serious and see what we can do to be happy, or imagine that we are happy. You'll decide yourselves the variant you prefer. I once got quite puzzled when a philosopher said that he can't tell why he loves namely that person, he just knows he does. If you say you are in love with your partner because you love your partner's sense of humor or their smile, there are other people who have a beautiful smile and a great sense of humor, and yet you're in love with your partner, not with them. What made you decide to choose your partner? I bet you don't know the exact answer to the question. Something similar happens with happiness. You know it's there, but it's difficult to define it. Moreover, happiness is better understood when it is absent. Happiness was rather neglected by psychologists in the past, as it was believed to be homespun and unworthy. Yet we all want to be happy. That is why we engage in the pursuit of happiness. It is this pursuit, by the way, that makes our life purposeful. So if we pursue happiness, it means it's on our mind. And this is what makes it worth investigating. The study of happiness takes on board some insights from evolutionary psychology. It looks like we've got some default programs that make us experience certain emotions. We're still more afraid of snakes or spiders than cars, although cars are statistically more dangerous in modern times than snakes or spiders. A similar default program in our brain seems to be related to the feeling of happiness. And that program is not about the momentary feeling of joy we experience quite often. It's more than that. Nettle believes that we are programmed not for happiness itself, but for the pursuit of happiness. It looks like we have in our heads a set of beliefs about things that we think will bring us happiness, and we are wired to pursue them by default. Surprisingly, it might even come as a shock to some. It's the pursuit of happiness that makes us happy, and not what we want to get at the end. You might ask yourselves, how come? This is impossible. Okay, now try to remember something you wanted so badly that you spent all your energy and time and effort to achieve that. The moment you got it, you felt undeniably happy. However, that feeling gradually faded away. There's nothing wrong with you. That's totally normal. You are programmed to feel like this. And that is why once you achieve one goal, you start pursuing another. What I managed to understand is that happiness is not something to think about prospectively. It is something happening here and now while I'm pursuing my dream. And sometimes I fall, sometimes I rise on the way, but when I get to my destination, I feel that sense of satisfaction. So I think that the realization that one was really happy is retrospective. Looking back, I can see that the path to my goal was what made me happy. It makes sense why so much emphasis is put on the importance of living in the present. This awareness of the present moment makes us happy. But hasn't Nettle given us a definition of happiness? He has, but he distinguishes between 3 levels of happiness. Level 1 happiness includes these momentary feelings of joy and pleasure, which are the result of something we've wanted and finally got it, sometimes even unexpectedly, by pure accident. Level 2 happiness includes the judgments about feelings that make people conclude whether or not they are happy with their lives. So, what judgments do you have? Level 3 happiness is related to the concept of good life, in which an individual has realized their full potential. Whenever defining happiness, we should avoid slipping into adopting that moralistic tone that would make us state that a flow-filled life makes a person happier than a life consisting of passive entertainment. My judgment on what makes me happy will differ from yours, and no one is in the right or in the wrong here. We have different views on what makes us happy, and that is okay. Nettle encourages us to focus on level 2 happiness. Here we should focus on the positive feelings or judgments about positive feelings. We shouldn't focus on broader human values or goods which are considered when describing level 3 happiness. Let's try to identify what makes us overall satisfied with our lives and what can be done to boost that. Let's see what makes our well-being. That basically means that our happiness is related to our personal ability of assessing our well-being or life satisfaction. Now, what Nettle warns us about is that our assessment will be context-bound. It will depend on whether we are hungry or not at the moment. If we are hungry, we might report we are less satisfied than if we are full. Just recently, I asked my students about their well-being, and it was gloomy outside. Guess what they said? They were less satisfied than they usually were on a sunnier day. What we compare is also very important. Very often we compare the pleasures and pains we've experienced so far, but what we compare is vital to how happy we will feel. Maybe you've heard about the silver medalists who are more unhappy than the bronze medalists. Yes, those who came second report being less happy than those who came third. Why? Because they can see what they missed, how close they were to getting the first place, and they missed it. Whereas those who got the third place, they see they have managed to get on the pedestal, they didn't come fourth. Another important thing to remember is that we are very bad at predicting what will make us happy. We might think that winning the lottery will make us happy, right? Research has shown that this is not the case. What's more, it looks like we will favor more pain over less pain. Daniel Kahneman and his colleagues conducting an experiment in which people were asked to plunge their hands in the water at 14 degrees Celsius for 60 seconds. Then after 15 seconds, the water was slightly warmed at 15 degrees and the participants kept their hands in that water for 30 seconds more. When asked what they would prefer, plunging their hands for 60 or 90 seconds, guess what answer they preferred? Remember, 15 degrees Celsius is still cold. The majority chose the long trial. It was due to the impression the long trial gave them at the end, a kind of sudden small improvement in their condition. They simply perceived it as slightly more favorable. Now, you probably would understand my confusion when I finished reading the first chapter. How can I assess my happiness then? How do I know if I am truly satisfied with my life? Things got even more complicated in the second chapter, Bread and Circuses. The well-known phrase once coined by the Roman satirist Juvenal implies that people need a bit of entertainment and a full stomach in order to be happy. Surprisingly, Juvenal was a happiness pessimist alongside Arthur Schopenhauer, Sigmund Freud, Nietzsche, and other intellectuals who believed that people are destined to be unhappy because of the gap existing between what they have and what they want. Oh my god. That means we're screwed. Studies have shown that overall people tend to be satisfied with how their lives turned out. By the way, it has nothing to do with how developed the country is. So the happiness pessimists were wrong, right? Nettle suggests an interesting idea. People can be happy simply because chronic unhappiness is unattractive. To a certain extent, they make believe, eventually believing it themselves. Fake it till you make it, they say, It also appears that the degree of happiness people report to experience at present is linked to how they see themselves in the future. We do like to think that our happiness will increase. Nettle says, most people's happiness is like their appetite after the main course. They think they are full, but they could still find a way to squeeze the dessert. Yet, we shall strive for balance and think critically. It is impossible to live in continual bliss. But to make unhappiness our mantra won't get us anywhere either. We shall keep in mind that nobody's life is perfect and avoid making the wrong comparisons. If we compare our lives with the influencer we follow on Instagram, we won't get far. We might actually miss out on being happy. So happiness is not linked to comfort and joy, nor to bread and circuses. I don't know, maybe it's linked to love and work, money and health. Remember Freud, the happiness pessimist? He said that the basis of well-being was love and work. One thing that came up quite clearly is that happiness is linked to health. The healthier the person is, the happier they report to be. This seems to be the result of their positive emotional tone. But can money buy happiness? Now, the moralists most probably would say no. If only it were that simple. It seems that people belonging to a higher social class report a higher satisfaction with their lives. So no money, no happiness. Again, it's not that simple. The point is that people have access to better education, they can choose their job, they can have varied non-work leisure activities. People at the top of the social heap may be happier simply because they can control their lives more. It's not about the quantity of money one has as it is about the fact that such people might worry less. So again, they have a more positive emotional tone. To prove that money doesn't play a key role in one's perception of happiness, try to think of what happens when one gets a pay rise. They feel happy. Time passes, and every time they get their paycheck with that rise, they stop experiencing the joy they felt at the beginning. This is known as adaptation. By the way, this adaptation relates to all aspects in our lives. That's why there are crises in marriages. We simply get used to that and don't experience the thrill from the very beginning. An interesting term was coined to explain why our levels of happiness return to the initial levels: hedonic treadmill. So imagine you want something badly, you get it, you get used to it, and you're back to point A. So when we get a good we wanted so badly to have, we are happy. But then we get used to it and we cease to feel the euphoria from the very beginning. This is why the level of happiness can't be linked to accumulation of goods. What about love?
Love me tender, love me sweet, never let me go.
By the way, studies have shown that married couples score more highly on the happiness scale. But when a large-scale longitudinal research was conducted in Germany, the researchers found that the newlyweds who once reported an increase in their level of happiness were back to the level of happiness they had had before marriage. So they were back to point A too. This makes Nettle conclude, it seems as if there is a set level of happiness to which we will return more or less whatever we do. Yet it appears that positional goods, like the ones related to status and money, won't make us happy. Whereas non-positional goods like our health, autonomy, social embeddedness, and quality of the environment are the ultimate source of our happiness. Do we take this into consideration when deciding on our happiness level? In Nettle's opinion, our choices in life are driven not by the actual experience of happiness, but by the implicit theory of happiness. If we are constantly told that a certain type of body or a car or a job is what makes one happy, we will end up believing that positional goods are indeed the ones to make us happy. We are tricked to make the wrong choices and end up disappointed because once we get those positional goods, we see we are not that happy as we were told we would be. Then I got to the next chapter, warriors and enthusiasts, and again I was surprised. Our happiness is linked with our genetics. I don't know we want quick and easy answers to extremely complex questions. Surprisingly, the answers are easy, yet they are somehow difficult to follow. And this is due to our personality types, which we are born with. And we already know how resistant we are towards change. Katie Michman gave us some insights on how to change, and Daniel Nettle also suggests it is possible to be happy even if one is high on neuroticism and tends to worry and exaggerate the significance of some life events. He shows that being too high on the positive emotions dimension might not be a good idea either, as such people tend to be too reckless and sometimes too frivolous. So we need to find the balance, and it is possible to do so. I personally believe that being aware of where one stands on the positive negative emotions dimension can help substantially change one's attitude towards life events and be happier. The moment I understand that I might exaggerate the significance of something, I manage to control the emotion and not spend time thinking about how unjust life is or ruminating about what should be forgotten. What we can say is that happiness is correlated to one's personality type. But it's wrong to assume that a warrior would be less happy than an enthusiast. It all boils down to how they address life events. We can change how we react, thus we can be in control of our happiness to a certain extent. So whether you are an neurotic or an extrovert doesn't guarantee happiness. I know you might think that there's something wrong about stating that enthusiasts might not be that happy. The thing is that enthusiasm and positive energy can be self-fulfilling prophecies. If you are more of a neurotic type like me, welcome to the club, don't worry. We do have the capacity to change. So the ability of managing one's emotions can influence the perception of how happy we feel. Now, what about wanting and liking? Do they result in happiness? Again, things are complex. First, we need to understand that the system controlling our desire is different from the system controlling our pleasure. Sometimes we might want something without actually liking it. They can definitely go hand in hand, and when that happens, the magic happens. We are happy. But let's be serious, in life we quite often might want what we don't like. Do you know when they go hand in hand? When we are looking for a mate. And when do they go their separate ways? When we want an increase in salary or social status. Hormones like serotonin and dopamine are linked to our liking and wanting mechanisms. Their levels are predictors of how much we like and want something. They are responsible for our happiness. So, what can we do to increase the levels of these hormones? But remember, we don't want to be forever happy, just to be satisfied with our life. If you think that a self-help book or a fancy retreat can help you, you might be far from the truth. No matter how hard one would try to convince you that that is what makes them happy, like dancing naked in front of the mirror every morning, you might discover that you don't become happier. The danger here is that you might end up thinking that something's wrong with you. And this is not the case. Everything's fine with you. Just what works for one person doesn't work for another. This idea that happiness is so easy to grasp does more harm than good. The key to get what you want and like is both simple and complicated at the same time. It's simple because you should reduce the impact of negative emotions, increase positive emotions, and change the subject. Stop talking about happiness, talk about something else. And here's where things get complicated. How to do that? First, we shall relax and understand that evolutionarily, we were not wired to be happy. We were programmed to worry, as we were easy prey for dangerous predators. And from an evolutionary perspective, it is less damaging to worry about being caught and killed and thus be always on our guards than to be in a state of continuous bliss and not worry at all.
Don't worry, be happy.
Sounds great, but I don't want to end up being a predator's dinner. This is what our ancestors thought, and they were right. What our brain doesn't seem to understand is that we live in different times and that there are no more predators. So what does our brain do? It starts imagining. That's why we worry when there's nothing to worry about. What is to be done about it? Get informed. Insights from cognitive behavioral therapy can be of great help. You might not afford a specialist, but you can afford to get informed and learn what works for you. I can say what helps me. Now, I have to admit, not always. A neurotic like me needs more time and patience. Keeping a journal can really help. I am the person who said, I won't ever write. I think it's useless. I've been doing it for 1 year and 4 months, and it does help. Mindfulness, meditation practice can also help, but sometimes it's very difficult to focus, particularly when I'm overwhelmed. I know I should be kind and patient with myself. Walking does a lot of good to me. Now, another thing I know that works is detaching myself from my desires. The less I want, the happier I am. One more thing, the presence of a complex self-image is important. If a person identifies themselves only within their job, they're bound to be less happy. Think of yourself as a complex human being whose interests go beyond their job or family. Having hobbies and different interests can help you boost the level of your happiness. I'd like you to understand that all this won't act like a magic wand and you'll stop worrying once and for all. What it will help achieve is not letting that worry spiral into something which is out of your control. And this is what we want to achieve. We shall remember that from the very start, Mother Nature has programmed us to pursue happiness and not to be forever happy. Trust me, no one wants it. Just read Brave New World by Aldous Huxley and you'll see what happens when one is dragged to be forever happy. I hope you understand that our pursuit of happiness is unique. So we shall find our own way of pursuing it. There's no use in keeping up with the Kardashians. That won't make us happier. But you've got the power to find what works, namely for you. And remember, those are not positional goods. Once you have to face a challenge, face it. Welcome challenges as once you've overcome them, you feel that sense of happiness you pursue. Don't get discouraged when it eventually fades away. It's perfectly normal. It's just an indication that you should consider facing the next challenge. Distinguish between wanting and liking, as that can make your pursuit of happiness much easier and enjoyable. It's not that you'll always choose liking over wanting. The point is that being aware of this distinction will help you get a better understanding of what you are doing it and make the pursuit more meaningful to you. At the end of the book, Daniel Nettle quotes Nathaniel Hawthorne, and I'd like to quote him as well. Happiness is a butterfly, which, when pursued, is always beyond our grasp, but which, if you will sit down quietly, may alight upon you. The point is that our goal is not happiness itself, but the pursuit of happiness, without thinking about it. We should just act and enjoy the rewards at the end. This is a never-ending cycle. Set a goal, pursue the goal, and you will be happy.